I think it's always worth spending some time walking around inside the camps at Kruger, because in a lot of cases the indigenous bush is still there. They haven't chopped it down, and there's quite a few thickets and trees with interesting species that you wouldn't necessarily see driving around in your vehicle. Because you're on foot, you can take your time, look into those nooks and crannies, search out the birds in the trees, the bushback under the foliage, or the tree agamas. All sorts of interesting creatures like that make for great photo opportunities. I don't know if you can hear that, but that's one of those great photo opportunities there. It's a purple-crested lory making an absolute racket in one of the trees behind my lodge.
I dare you dig a little deeper. It makes you feel a little stronger. Who knows what you may find? You'll see in your own time. It might just take a little longer. It all goes by so slowly. Ooh, you waited your whole life. Your days turn into nights. Now let the river flow deep into the ocean. All the time you go, you are moving with emotion. Let the river flow. Can you hear it whisper? It goes by so slow, like a solitary drifter.
I really love coming across these seasonal summer pools that are diminishing in size as the summer progresses and the rainfall reduces. They've captured a group of tadpoles and fish in this one, and in the middle of it is a half-meter long crocodile, and around the edges are various storks and egrets. We've got a Marabou stork, a black stork, 2 yellow-billed storks, 2 woolly neck storks, and intermediate egrets all around fishing for these tadpoles, and the crocodile sitting in the middle of it, occasionally catching a fish or a frog, and occasionally snapping out at some of the birds. Now this situation is a difficult one for exposure because we've got glare off the water, bright sunlight and shade, and combined with that, white feathers and black feathers. So I'm finding the best opportunity here is to use, or the best option here is to use a polarizing filter on the end of my lens to cut the glare off the feathers in the water, and then use a manual exposure to manage the birds. So what I've done is I've taken a spot reading off the black feathers and a spot reading off the white feathers, and I'm finding that the best option is to overexpose the whites by 1 1/3 stop and to underexpose the blacks by 2 stops. And sometimes that's the same setting, same shutter speed setting, and sometimes when the light gets a bit brighter and the sun comes out, it's not, and I have to dial in a different shutter speed to manage whether I'm taking a dark bird or a white bird. So in the duller conditions, the shady conditions, I'm finding that the dynamic range of the camera is enough to capture both the dark and the white feathers, but as it gets brighter, it becomes more difficult, and I have to just move the shutter speed 2/3 of a stop one way or the other, depending on whether I'm photographing a black or a white bird. I hope that makes sense to you. We've just been lucky enough to see a crash of rhino in a mud wallow, and a crash, for those of you who don't know, is the very appropriate collective noun for a rhino. And it's really nice to see them like this, because normally one sees them singly or in pairs with a mother and a calf, and generally quite often you don't see them together in this collection. And they were really enjoying just mud wallowing and getting cool, getting the flies and ticks off in the sun. And obviously with a sighting like that, there's quite a press of cars going past, so I've moved on. And I think it's important that when you're photographing these animals that you give them space, but also give other people a chance to see them as well. So once you've taken a few shots, it's only polite perhaps to move on and allow other people to enjoy the same thing. Quite often we're taking pictures of two animals at the same time, or two heads at the same time. And I find that the trick to that is to always focus, or try to focus on the closer head, the closer eye. And the second thing is always to watch the head position of the first animal, the one you've got in focus, and just ignore the second one. Just take a shot every time you see the first animal's head move into an attractive pose or a pose that you want, and ignore the second animal's head. And take quite a lot of shots, and that way you can select the best ones later with the head positions of both animals in good alignment for the shot. So it's just a nice little trick to use when you're photographing two animals at the same time.
How dare you run a little faster? One step, you are on your way now. Embrace all your weakness, therein lies the secret. The water's never gonna drain out. It all goes by so slowly. Ooh, you waited your whole life. Your days turn into nights. Now let the river flow deep into the ocean. All the time you know you are moving with emotion. Let the river flow.
One of the things I like to do with a fixed focal length lens is I don't really want to keep changing cameras or use a zoom lens, because quite often the zoom lenses are a bit slower than the fixed primes. So with a fixed focal length lens, what I like to do when the subject is too close to the camera is either back up, which is a perfectly valid option, but if you don't want to back up, but you still want to get more of the scene into the shot with that nice shallow depth of field, because that's pretty much what you want to preserve. Backing up destroys that effect. What you can do is stitch together a few different shots of the animal and make a wildlife panorama. It works really well. So the trick is to photograph the animal that you're concerned with in trying to frame it entirely. Try and frame that animal in one shot, and then take a number of shots around the animal of the background and stitch the whole thing together later on. And it's always a good idea just to take a shot of the ground or your hand or the sky or something at either end of that panorama. So you start out with a shot of the ground and finish up with a shot of the ground. That way you know that all of the images in between are all part of the panorama and are supposed to be stitched together.